Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I'm your host, Holly Petre. This week, we're going to be talking about the Nextbite saga. Over the past week, we've seen a flurry of news about Nextbite, the virtual brand company. One of the big three virtual restaurant companies, Nextbite has been in the headlines for other reasons lately. In the weeks leading up to today, the company completed 3 rounds of layoffs, and this week was sold to competitor Sam Nazarian, owner of C3 and SBE. This consolidation is an interesting move for the industry, but really, it begs the question, what does it mean for virtual brands? We have our own Joanna Fantozzi on the podcast to discuss. Also, we'll be talking about Yum Brands' latest news. As we mentioned on the pod before, Yum's leaders have said they're looking for another acquisition. This week, Alicia Kelso outlined some of the company's potential targets, and we are here to discuss the probability of each and every single one. I'm kidding, she outlined like 40 things in there, but we'll outline some of them. Finally, we'll be talking about our latest showdown. This month, it's the Barbecue Showdown, featuring 7 barbecue brands from across the country. Make sure to eat before you listen to this discussion, but also go on LinkedIn and Instagram to vote for your favorites. The winner will be announced the week of July 3rd. This week's guest is Matthew Padilla, Culinary Innovation Director at True Food Kitchen. And now it's time to introduce my lovely, wonderful, amazing, talented co-hosts.
Well, that was quite an intro. I'm Sam Oches, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
I'm Leigh Zinsmeister, Managing Editor at NRN.
And I'm Joanna Fantozzi, Senior Editor at Nation's Restaurant News.
And now it's time to kick it over to this week's sponsor. Belgioioso Cheese is a family-owned and operated company specializing in artisan Italian cheese making. Using only natural ingredients and fresh, local Wisconsin milk, master cheesemakers handcraft a full line of exceptional cheeses, guided by a commitment to quality and a respect for tradition. Ask your distributor about Belgioioso's award-winning fresh mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, mascarpone, American grana, and Parmesan. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty. I was feeling very soccery today with that reference. So how are you guys doing?
Okay.
Good.
Highly suspicious of everything you say for some reason, but doing okay.
No reason.
I disagree with your with your suggestion that people eat beforehand, because I think there's nothing quite like hungry voting.
Well, we have this discussion every week, Joanna. We always record this at 11 a.m. and we're always starved by the end of our recording. Like we all are, because we talk about food the whole time. So we're always starved. So I'm trying to let our listeners know that it's going to be a hunger-inducing conversation.
Well, even worse, it's noon this time, so I'm even hungrier than normal. Although, you know, Holly, you've been in this industry long enough. You learn to, when you write about food, you cannot let it go to your head or your stomach. You just have to treat it as business as usual. And yeah, I think I'm doing just fine.
I edited those Barbecue Showdown videos without eating breakfast that morning, and I was at the office, and you should have heard me grumbling about it because I was starved looking at those photos. They are mouth-wateringly good. So before we discuss barbecue showdown, too many B's. You should go to a barbecue place, your local barbecue place, and get some food because you're going to want to eat some ribs while you're watching these videos. Brisket is really what a lot of people are known for on this barbecue showdown. Some people are known for ribs, but a lot of brisket. That's what I learned.
Thanks for that preview.
You know what, Sam? You're welcome. You're welcome for that preview. I
Thanks,
know
Holly.
it's sarcasm, but I'm letting you know that you're welcome.
Great.
All right, well, Joanna has to write things, so we got to make this quick this week because she's a busy lady. The rest of us, not so much, but Joanna's very busy.
We don't need to make the content quick. I was just saying, because we should get to the actual discussion. We could talk about Nextbite all day if you want. I probably could talk about it for a while. But
Well, we kibitz for a long time before we actually start this conversation every week. So this week we cut it short so we could actually get to the meat of the matter. No, I'm really talking about meat a lot this week.
Meat, like barbecue meat?
That's what I must be on my mind.
get to the brisket of the matter.
We're spiraling.
We spiral
spiraling.
Are you shocked?
Nope, not at all. Fully expected of us.
I think our listeners just don't expect it.
I got a compliment from a listener recently that was like that who said that he thought we were very funny. And so and by we, I mean he said you guys, but I had to remind him that I'm not usually on the podcast, so it's not me you're
2 weeks
hearing
in a row,
usually.
Joanna. 2 weeks in a row. I mean, I'm just hilarious. What can I say? I get it.
Humble too.
You gotta know your strengths, and you gotta be able to accept them, Sam. And I just, I know one of my strengths is comedy. I complimented you for your comedy yesterday.
Thank you. Yes. And maybe in a few weeks, I'll be able to share with with our listeners. I shared a podcast with a comedian yesterday. It was very interesting. Not my own podcast. It was a different podcast. But I'm going to keep the rest under wraps until it's public. It was very interesting.
I mean, you guys share a podcast with a comedian every week. So you're welcome for that.
Let's get into this Nexbite saga. Oh, man.
Which is not funny. So let's talk about Nexbite with our serious faces on.
Okay.
See, Sam laughed. He thinks I'm funny. Leanne does not think I'm funny, but...
It was a pity laugh.
It was a genuine laugh. I saw it in your face. Anyways, let's talk about Nexbite. So, not a laughing matter. Joanna, you wrote several pieces this week on Nexbite. It was a real Nexbite-y week for you. So you are going to be our expert today on Nexbite and exactly what's been going on. I mean, we saw that Nexbite sold Ordermark last week. They'd also previously had several rounds of layoffs at their company, which is kind of in line with the tech industry, kind of going. So that's part of what it is, but also
That's the technical term.
That's the technical term. But then they also sold Nexbite this week. So that was like kind of some unexpected news. But you also wrote this huge analysis on Nexbite that was in the works for a while. And I know you spoke with a lot of people. So you are our expert here. I defer to you.
I don't know if any listeners care about this, but as soon as the layoffs were announced, or not, they didn't really announce, and as soon as people were aware of the layoffs via LinkedIn, a bunch of LinkedIn posts at Nextbite, this was last month. As soon as that happened, I started working on a story about Nextbite, and so and talking to various sources, former employees, experts, and I've been working on this for probably like 3 weeks. And then the news about first selling off Ordermark and then Nexbite being sold to SBE founder Sam Nazarian. That all happened as I was about to publish. So it kind of looks like I just wrote 3 stories in a row, but in reality I had one of them cooking for a long time. I don't know if anyone cares, but that is a behind the scenes thing. It's been in the works for a while. Because I think that the situation at Nextbite was very complicated, and is indicative of kind of 2 things. The virtual restaurant industry is kind of in flux, I think. It's not quite the bullish, exciting, exploding industry that it was maybe 2 years ago during the pandemic. And things are in change. That doesn't necessarily mean that the virtual restaurants or ghost kitchens are dead. It just means I think that things are changing and not everyone is going to, make it in the long run. And also I think it's indicative of the food tech space in general, which I'm going to be talking about a lot in Tech Tracker, is that there's a lot of moves going on in food tech right now. Lots of layoffs, companies being sold, consolidations, a lot of M&A activity. And I think it's just, we're going to see a shakeout of just fewer tech companies probably in the long run, but it's probably good because it's less complexity in the long run.
And it's also, I mean, this is obviously part of a bigger trend in technology across the tech world in general. There's just been a ton of layoffs happening. And there are any number of reasons for this, but certainly for the virtual brand category, and probably for a lot more of technology at large, the last 3 years were such a crazy period of innovation for technology. There was so much pivoting and development and a lot of rash decisions made, and a lot of decisions made based on thinking that the world would be a certain way long term. And then when it became obvious that the world was not going to be that long term, and when things settled out, it looks like a lot of that innovation, the rush to hire, the rush to pivot, a lot of that just was very bloated, right? And we've talked about this in combination with our writing on efficiency. And I've mentioned this multiple times, but just to reiterate, Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, now Meta, he called 2023 the year of efficiency. And when he did that, he laid off 10,000 plus people. And this was their story, which was in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the big thing that happened in the last 3 years. Not allowed to say that word anymore.
You already said it.
I already said it. It's out there. Sorry, YouTube. In the middle of all of that, they rushed to hire. They made these assumptions about the virtual world to come. They rushed to hire all these people. And they got to 2023 and discovered, things are not as we thought. So we're going to lay off all these people, right? And that is true, I think, too, of virtual brands. It was not that long ago that there was a report stating that virtual brands could become $1 trillion industry. I don't mean to, kick this dead horse over and over again, but the restaurant industry itself is about $1 trillion. And I think they were projecting that at 2030. That was very wildly off base, mostly because, of course, customers went back to restaurants. They even if they're not dining in the restrooms, customers physically went back to restaurants, even if it was to take it out or go through the drive-through. And virtual brands really settled into the niche that I think they were always destined to be. But the last 3 years of innovation within virtual brands has led to this mad dash into the space. I mean, consider that this industry is about 4 years old, virtual brands. About 4 years since those really became a thing. It was really thrown together hastily, right? And so when you get to this period where a company like Nexbite is seemingly imploding, I guess you have to sort of wonder, well, maybe that's not too much of a surprise because it was put together with some assumptions in the long term that really never came to bear. So that's kind of, I think, the foundation of this. And I could go on and on about some of the other implications, but Leanne, I'm curious what your thoughts are on everything.
Yeah, the biggest thing that's coming to mind right now is that I don't think Nextbite is a different thing, but in terms of the big virtual ghost kitchen industry, quote unquote, as a subset of the restaurant industry, I don't necessarily think of it as having failed, because those are things that were necessary. All of these companies got together and found a way to keep people fed, to keep people employed. And really, I mean, we were talking a little bit about ghost kitchens before the pandemic, before the thing, and I give up. But it's just it's honestly miraculous what they managed to pull off. And for them to do that successfully for 3 years and now to, pivot or peter out or whatever is happening, I don't think a lot of people are going to look back and see that as a failure. But there's definitely a big shift in that space happening right now by necessity. So it's just a matter of seeing kind of how it shakes off. Now, the Nextbite situation has been a little messier than some of these other virtual restaurant companies right now. But overall, I don't think that what they've achieved over the last 3 years is a failure in any way, even if the company ceases to exist as we know it.
It is interesting that the Nextbite name, for now at least, is living on, because that's because at SBE they're going to be known as Nextbite by SBE, and the virtual brands under that umbrella, under that Nextbite umbrella, are going to continue under that umbrella. It's not like they're going to be consolidated in with C3's brands like Crispy Rice, etc. But I think that's something that comes to mind for me. That is, I mean, that was basically a theme of kind of a lot of my reporting, is you don't want to be a gimmick. And I feel like gimmicks work in the short term, which, yes, a lot of virtual brands were kind of short-term fixes for the industry. And so that's fine. But in the long term, a lot of these celebrity brands, for example, or just kind of gimmicky ideas were based off of something that might be a fun one-time order. Maybe you want to see what Wiz Khalifa's food would taste like, or Mr. Beast, etc. And I mean, I guess I should clarify that Mr. Beast is not Nextbite, their VDC, virtual dining concepts. But I think that people are realizing that they don't necessarily just want a one-time celebrity-driven brand. They just want something that will be a go-to restaurant, whether that's virtual or not.
Well, Joanna, there was a line you had in your story, and this isn't a direct quote, but I thought it was a really, really interesting point, which is that these companies really treated themselves like tech companies, not food companies. So, in other words, the technology was the priority here, right? Allowing this capability of creating a network of brands and serving it via third-party platforms or proprietary, white label brand solutions, whatever. That they were looking past the food. The food was secondary. And to that point, Joanna, there have been a lot of negative comments on some of the most premier virtual brands. And yes, Mr. Beast is a virtual dining concepts brand, but there's been a lot of negative reviews, as you pointed out, Joanna, in your story for that brand. A lot of people didn't like the food. And yeah, not only will you not, you want to check it out because it's Mr. Beast and, you check it out once and then you don't come back. But like the key to any restaurant, the key to success for any restaurant is not getting somebody to come try your food. It's getting them to come back for it. That they tried your food, they liked it, and they want to keep coming back. If you can't do that, you're going to fail. So that it's almost like it's the reverse. Because I think when I talk a lot of restaurant operators, when you talk to them about, well, what's your strategy for, getting restaurant or getting customers, and it's, oh, well, I got to get my food in their mouths. Like their goal is like, I need them to try this. With virtual brands, it was reverse. It was almost like they were like, easy. They're going to try it because it's Wiz Khalifa's brand. They didn't think about how do they come back for it. And right off the bat, if your food's not good, it's not going to work. So you're right. It is a novelty to some degree. I can't help but wonder, though, and to Leanne's point, I think that this is a long-term industry. I think virtual brands have a long-term place in restaurants. But I think we're going to be seeing in real time the maturation of this category. We've already been seeing it for the last couple of years. There's some companies like Salted is one that comes to mind. I think that they have a little bit of a unique model on what they're doing. SBE itself, seems, they seem to have an understanding of what they're trying to do and to accomplish. There's a maturation of this category that will happen that I think will get to a point where they understand food comes first, technology comes second, and this is sort of a unique, again, niche within restaurants. But it's not going to be without a lot of troubles on the path. And Nexbite, unfortunately, it was just a victim to this learning curve that I think the virtual brand category is on.
Well, we've seen some really great success stories from virtual brands. It's not like there aren't ones in the industry. I mean, Alicia talked to Andre from Doghouse at the NRA show. Their virtual brand, Badass Burritos, is breakfast brand. Does a lot of B's in a row.
Badass breakfast burritos, yes.
Is a breakfast burrito brand that started when one location in Chicago turned on their app from 1 to 6 a.m. and served breakfast burritos. And they had all this success, and the brand is now 50% of their off-premises revenue for all of Doghouse. And they had a bunch of virtual brands, closed all the ones except for this Badass breakfast burrito. And they're doing an insane amount of business on it. And they've expanded it to more restaurants than just that one that it started at. They have all the SKUs in the restaurant. So there are instances where a virtual brand can really work out for you if you do things like keep the same SKUs in the restaurant. You're using your ingredients that you already have, and you're using a time slot that maybe isn't available to your regular customers. Like if you do something that works out for the restaurant, if you already have a restaurant, it seems to be working. But like SBE they have a food hall here in New York City. It's a great food hall, but everything's in person. I think that shows the success of a virtual brand is if you can bring it to an in-person venue and it does well, that's another way to show that a virtual brand can succeed.
Yeah, and it's that I was going to say the big difference here, and to me, you said the Doghouse virtual brand is doing really well. Yes, because what is the difference here? It's a brick and mortar company that's launching a virtual brand, and it does seem like those are the ones, for the most part, not for everything, but for the most part, those are the ones that do well in the long run because they have that backing of a well-known brand, a well-known brick and mortar brand. They have your customers have some place to go to, and they know where their food is coming from. So I think it's automatically a little bit easier that way.
Restaurants also have the luxury now of taking their time to figure out what works for them in the virtual space. I mean, 3 years ago, these companies were just throwing everything at the wall because everyone was ordering food at home. And so they wanted to be the company that people were ordering from. But now that so many people are back to dining in restaurants, I talked to Wiener Schnitzel's COO in Chicago, and they are just starting to do ghost kitchens in locations where they don't have any units. So it's a little different. They're not using their own kitchens, but they're starting with just 3 ghost kitchens to start with to see how it goes. And then they're planning to grow and expand that because they have the luxury of carefully selecting what region. And they're also using it as sort of a test market to see, do we want to build a brick and mortar Wiener Schnitzel in this town? So there are lots of ways to still make virtual restaurants work for your brand. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly what works. Doghouse had a gap in day parts that they were missing out on, and so they found a way to take advantage of it, like Holly said, using resources they already have. So those kinds of like very specific test models are great right now, I think.
Yeah, and just to button it up, all this up, I'd say it comes down to complexity and bandwidth, right? And Joanna points this out in her story, which is, for so many of the failures, it was because they were overly complex. Because if you offered a virtual brand to a host kitchen, and it was all additive, it could have been additive equipment, additive ingredients, then you're adding a layer of complexity onto your operation that becomes untenable. Versus the Doghouse model, to Holly's point, which is Doghouse already had these SKUs, right? A lot of these menu items, they built brands around existing menu items. That's a smarter way to do it than to just layer something else entirely on top of it. And then the bandwidth thing, to what Leanne was saying, when we think back to 3 years ago and the state of things when this really took off, I have a brother-in-law here in Columbus who is a GM of a hotel. And for 4 months, he had 0 customers because they weren't accepting customers for 4 months, right? Because hotels just like nobody's traveling. And he had to do anything to make money. And so he was doing ghost kitchens out of his kitchen. Now he had the bandwidth. He had no customers. So he was like, okay, how do I make money? And he used ghost kitchens. Once customers came back, ghost kitchens are gone, right? So, and that was very true of a lot of restaurants. When sales dropped 50% and you have bandwidth, you can layer this on and say, okay, I'm going to do something a little different to try something. But by and large, as we have seen from our top 500, which is coming out, if you're listening to this in a few days, you will see, by and large, business is back to 2019 levels or better. So you probably don't have bandwidth for virtual brands anymore. So think as much as you want about, whether or not it makes sense for you. And yeah, like to what Leanne was saying, I mean, is you might be a dessert concept that adds a breakfast virtual brand. There might be ways to strategically leverage it, but you are probably not in a position where you need that complexity. You probably don't have the bandwidth. So if those are true of you, virtual brand's not going to be your thing.
Yeah, definitely complexity is the other key element here. The first being making sure your food actually tastes good, but complexity was such an issue with multiple sources that I spoke with. One of my sources who owns a virtual restaurant company of their own was saying that he has such simple like SKUs, and he literally has a peanut butter and jelly concept and a grilled cheese concept. Those are like, I can't even imagine thinking, oh, I want to get peanut butter and jelly delivered. First of all, because I don't like peanut butter, which is, I know, weird. But I mean, just why not make it yourself? But hey, it's not complex, that's for sure. It's very easy to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a grilled cheese sandwich. And some of the things that I mentioned was that, not to pick on again the Wiz Khalifa, but that their food required making like 6 different dipping sauces from scratch, and it added too much complexity to the kitchen. It became overwhelming for a lot of these operators.
Well, that's what we learned from QSRs. Complexity isn't great. You want to keep things as simple as humanly possible. That's what makes QSR so successful, and why they do well in any inflationary environment, and why they're always going to be a success is because QSRs keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what they do. So I feel like we've really beat that horse to death. So not to use a terrible metaphor, but Sam used it earlier, so I'm just going to continue using it.
It's my go-to.
Line. It's going to be
I give you permission.
Thank you. So now let's talk about yum. Yum, yum, yum. I thought of yummy when I said that. Now I can't stop thinking about it. So Yum Brands mentioned Leanne's poor face. Yum Brands mentioned a few weeks ago, or they've mentioned several times throughout the past few weeks. So it's their CEO and CFO have both mentioned throughout Alicia quotes something. She said she calls it an analyst conference circuit. that is what it was this month. That they went to several conferences, and both of them have said, we're looking for an acquisition. We'd heard rumblings about it. We knew it was going on, but they both said, we're looking for an acquisition. We're doing it. We want it. And so Alicia put this great thing together. We don't have her on the pod because we chose Joanna over her this week. Kidding, Alicia. I know.
Congrats, Joanna.
Wow.
But so she wrote this great piece about the brands that Yum might be looking at, and it includes several segments, and then she breaks it down each segment by brands that it could be looking for. So it's Mediterranean, Asian, sandwiches, bakery cafe, and coffee beverages. So these are the areas that Yum is lacking in its portfolio as of now, and these are the areas that Alicia was able to identify and say, this is really where they could be looking. We've mentioned on this pod before, I think they'll go into like a healthy Mediterranean area, but I am not a good predictor of anything. So it's probably the opposite direction they're going to go in. But they also mentioned that they want to stick in like a QSR area because they love QSR. So that's another thing to think about, especially with the acquisition of Habit Burger, which was something that they lauded as this great success. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to what a possible acquisition for Yum could be. I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts.
I think this was a really smart approach to making, I don't know if I would call them predictions, but to like analyzing the landscape and Yum's place in it. I mean, it lines up with a lot of things that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Yum is so good at QSR. They're just so good at it. And Yum is also really good at taking advantage of all of their brands and testing things across different brands. So I agree with Alicia that I think they'll target another QSR in a segment they don't already cover. I'm especially intrigued by the sandwich and coffee categories, which Alicia are 2 of the 5 categories that Alicia pulled out. I think they just feel like Yum to me. I don't know, Mediterranean, even the fast casual Mediterranean restaurants feel like a little more upscale, not in a bad way, but just feels a little different from what Yum does. So those are the 2 that I would probably, if we were making bets here, which I don't do at work. Those are 2 that I would bet on. I don't know. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in this story. She really looks at some emerging brands. Sandwich, is really hot right now. RBI has Firehouse, Inspire has Jimmy John's. So that feels like a really hot category right now. Of course, everyone thinks of Subway, which is way outside of Yum's. They've specifically said they're targeting emerging brands. So Subway is out of the running, but like a brand that feels like it could be the next Subway, I feel like would be a really good fit for Yum brands. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that's a really great. Oh, sorry, guys, Sam, go ahead.
No, Joanna, our guest host gets precedence. You're a guest.
I was just gonna basically agree with Leanne. I think that I think that sandwiches to me actually sounds like out of the 5 categories Alicia mentioned, I think sandwiches seems like the most likely. I don't think that we'll see a Subway acquisition though. I don't think. I think that they're more likely to be acquired by some sort of private equity company.
I totally agree, to be clear. Yeah.
Especially since they've been struggling lately. Like I just don't think so. And I feel like a good, I'm looking at Alicia's story right now. I feel like a good fit could be Capriati's maybe. But that might be a good fit. The other category that I think would be great to look into is the bakery cafe category, since that has been seeing a lot of movement lately. With Panera and I featured Paris Baguette in our top 500 as a growing brand, and so I don't know if necessarily them, but I mean that could also be a possibility.
It's funny, I messaged Alicia after her story came out and I read it and I said, Paris Baguette is such a smart idea. I think that could be a really big contender. So I agree with you, Joanna.
All right, so I'm going to go to bat for coffee here, which I know is included, but I think less sandwich, I think more coffee, and here's why. As we've seen in the top 500, and dear listeners, you soon will too, coffee had a big year in 2022. We have these companies such as Dutch Bros, Scooters, Human Bean. There are all these upstart coffee concepts that are killing it right now. And what is key to them killing it is they're all doing it out of these tiny footprint, mostly drive-through only stores. And you can pop those things into basically any parking lot in America and turn it on, and off you go. And they're validated in their booming sales and unit growth that we saw in 2022. Dutch Bros has been just this absolute incredible success story, and filed an IPO, and yeah, they're one of the hottest brands out there right now. I don't think it's going to be Dutch Bros, but a Dutch Bros competitor, I think, could certainly be a target. And even just beyond the fact that coffee is really in, Starbucks, I think, is vulnerable. Beyond Starbucks and Dunkin', the competition in coffee is really not, there's not a huge major player. And so I just think that the market is really ripe for another coffee player that Yum could invest in. Again, sort of the cheaper upfront costs in that small footprint. All of the trends today in mobile ordering technology, all of it really play to the success of those concepts. But the last thing I'll say about coffee is they could, for their other 4 concepts, get a high quality coffee product to pop into their existing restaurants, right? Like they could co-brand the heck out of that thing and have a beverage product. You wouldn't do it at all of them, because that would sort of negate the need for your existing locations for that coffee concept. But you have a really nice opportunity to bring these brands together and co-branding, and Yum is the king of co-branding, or they have been in the past. It's not as much so recently. So anyway, that's why I'm going to suggest that I think coffee would be an obvious target, and we'll see. Yes, none of us can make these predictions, and if this is a 5-year runway that they're looking at, who knows, maybe 3-4 years from now coffee's not as hot. But if I were a betting man, coffee's the category I'm getting into.
It's
now that we've all
Go ahead.
Now that we've all laid out our guesses, they're going to go with Asian or something that's not on the list at all. So I'm glad we all got our say in now.
I'll blame Alicia. Don't worry.
It's interesting that you said coffee, Sam, because I think about my love, Taco Bell. They have their whole breakfast category is doing great right now. And they have their own proprietary coffee at Taco Bell. And they have like these really interesting coffee drinks. So, and I know they're trying to build on that, and they're trying to increase their business at breakfast, which is already doing great. So I think, so the coffee thing actually strikes me as not what they're going to pick, because I think that they're really trying to get this Taco Bell breakfast to become a bigger day part for them. And so, and they have their own coffee. And I don't know, like that was my thought when you said coffee, was Taco Bell's breakfast is a big moneymaker. And I don't know if they'd want to screw with that.
If you would rather a $3 billion coffee brand or a $100 million coffee business as part of your existing brand, which would you choose?
So I have a couple thoughts here. One is that Sam recoiled at the phrase Taco Bell proprietary coffee. I thought he was going to vomit. That was beautiful.
Those don't go together very well. Sorry.
And watch it. Oh my God.
Sorry,
the
Taco
look
Bell.
on his face. I think he turned green. Anyway. My other thought is that this is one of the things that Yum is so good at, is testing something at, say, KFC and then rolling it out at Pizza Hut. And those sorts of things usually are like sustainable packaging or whatever, things that make sense across segments. But it would not surprise me if Yum Brands bought a coffee brand and then started, playing with that menu using these wacky coffee drinks that they've been testing or serving at Taco Bell. Like, that actually strikes me as a very Yum Brands thing to do. Much apologies to Sam.
Can I throw in a wild card?
Yeah.
Please.
My wild card is going against the actual premise, which is that we were saying that they're definitely going to, I am going against Alicia's premise, I will say, that they're going to pick up a quick service. But I could see them possibly trying to pick up a fast casual and make the next Chipotle. I know, I feel like everybody always compares this version of Chipotle, that version of Chipotle, but it's true. And maybe they might want to go that route.
Interesting. I think that, so I'm reading from her story. This is a direct quote. Their CFO, said that QSR was a great space to be in because of its mass appeal and value positioning, and that Yum is currently working to transition Pizza Hut business away from dine-in to delivery carryout. So I think that those are some interesting things that she brought up. Again, she could totally be wrong. Alicia, if you're listening to this, you could be wrong. We're not perfect. Most of us, in fact, are usually wrong. Or at least me, I'm usually wrong.
I was gonna say, not a great pitch for this show, Holly.
Well, I always think about that stat that you told us, Sam, that 90% of listeners think that what they hear is correct. And that always really just like, I always try to be very careful now because I'm just like, what if I say something wrong? But it's usually wrong about personal things, not about work. So if that's any help. Usually wrong about like predictions and stuff like that. But
that's a whole other podcast.
That's our personal podcast. But anyway, let's talk about the Barbecue Showdown. Listeners, if you need to eat now, go ahead and eat because we're about to make you really hungry. Sam, why don't you tell us about the Barbecue Showdown?
Sure, Holly, happily. This is our 5th showdown. We've now covered plant-based, breakfast, chicken, and tacos. So you're probably well familiar with our showdown series. And if you have opinions, this is for you. This is all designed to really just gauge the opinions of the industry on what are the concepts that the industry feels are really legit and have legs to become something significant. And so we're picking, let's call it emerging concepts, typically concepts with 100 units or less, 7 to 9 concepts per category, and then our team writes about them. We do some video, and you can go catch that at our Barbecue Showdown at nrn.com. Barbecue, I think, is really interesting because I don't think barbecue was a very significant category until about maybe a decade ago. Most of the concepts on our list have been around for a long time, but for the most part, until a decade ago or so, barbecue was really more of a regional, sort of barbecue, roadside barbecue stand kind of thing. Only now, recently, in the last 10 to 15 years, has it become something scalable as I think as food in general. People have become more interested in food since, Food Network and Top Chef and celebrity chefs and all that good stuff. As people become more interested in food, they've become more interested in the place of food, the story of food, the regionality of food, and barbecue plays into all of that perfectly. So as that's happened, these concepts have really sprung up and scaled into other parts of the country where barbecue really wasn't as much a thing before. And as such, we're seeing a lot of very successful barbecue concepts. So go to nrn.com, check out the Barbecue Showdown, watch the videos, read the stories, get to know some of these concepts that we believe really do have a lot of potential to become big national success stories, and vote. And you go to our Instagram, NRN's Instagram, which I think is just Nation's Restaurant News, or check us out at LinkedIn. Either one of those places, you can vote for your favorite after you've read up on the 7 concepts we have put forward.
Well, in some of these concepts, I'm thinking of the one that you covered, Sam, City Barbecue. They take barbecue from across the country. So you're not going to one regional place and getting like South Carolina style barbecue, and that's all that you can get. You're going to these places and you're getting barbecue from across the country. So you're getting a little bit of Alabama style barbecue, a little bit of South Carolina, a little bit of Texas. That's another barbecue, Texas.
Why do we let you host this podcast?
I blanked. My mind just went completely blank. And I was like, all I could think of is North and South Carolina. So it was a moment. I had a little moment. I'm a little full from food. So I'm like in like a little bit of a food coma. But there's this really interesting that a few of these concepts had this global, it's not global, but countrywide, national. I told you there's something wrong with my brain today. Have this national appeal for different flavors of barbecue in one environment. So like, when you go to Tennessee, like I was in Nashville last year, you could only get barbecue from Nashville, and they're super famous for it. They're known for their barbecue. Like the places have lines out around the block, and a lot of these places still have lines around the block and are really famous when they open up. But you can only get one style, and a lot of these places have multiple styles, and so that's eliminating the no vote, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, but it's also a way to bring in new customers who may have never tried a different kind of barbecue before, in Ohio, where City Barbecue is. So, it's interesting to think about the fact that barbecue can also open up in other areas, like Mighty Quinn's is in New York City. New York City is not known for barbecue. So there's all these different factors that happen when you expand barbecue concepts that I think is interesting to learn. Like I'm thinking about Solman's, which is Alabama style barbecue. No, Solman's is not Alabama style. Now I'm getting confused. Solman's is a really old concept. Leanne's like shaking her head. Solman's is they were born in 1970 something. They have like these really great pictures. It's all about pork there. But like they're starting to expand across the country. And so you think about a lot of these things that they were known for really good ribs. They were like, ribs are our thing. And so they expanded with their ribs. And so I think it's so interesting. I think barbecue is a really interesting category. And the way that these brands have divided up the way that regionality goes and the way that they're taking all the flavors or they're just taking one flavor and they're expanding. I think it's a really interesting concept.
It's a real roundabout story. Thank you, Holly.
I also think it's great. I moved to Texas 21 years ago. I no longer live there, but I did move there 21 years ago and started eating barbecue all the time. I'm a brisket girl. My favorite barbecue spot was somebody's backyard where the guys would just stand around all day, like cooking the brisket. You have to cook it for 12 hours to do it right. Anyway, I'm a barbecue snob, some might say. But I'm delighted that there are at least 3 barbecue spots here in New York City that I trust, that I can go to for barbecue. And that wasn't true, like even when I moved here 10 years ago. So barbecue, a very exciting category. And I'm really excited about all these brands that we've covered in the showdown.
What's your favorite kind of barbecue? What's your favorite regional barbecue, Leanne?
I don't know a lot about the different regions. I'm not a barbecue like connoisseur. I just know what I like and I like what I like. But I just love a good brisket. It's probably Texas style if I had to guess, because that's like what I was raised on. But I just like, barbecue that tastes good and tastes how it's supposed to taste.
Don't we all?
There are purists who will fight about the differences in styles. As somebody who lived in North Carolina for 13 years, I do love some North Carolina barbecue, but the argument between different styles is pretty stupid. If you can enjoy brisket, you can enjoy pulled pork, you can enjoy ribs, burnt ends, whatever your heart desires, go do it. And so, yeah, a lot of these brands offer all of the above. It's fun to experiment and try new regions and see what that, see what all the regionality is about, distinct flavors, but you don't need to participate in the barbecue war.
As someone who is not a barbecue, like Leanne, I'm not really a barbecue connoisseur, but I enjoy it. I enjoy eating it. I think that's something that I enjoy about barbecue is something that barbecue connoisseurs sometimes look down upon, which is I like sauce. And I feel like sometimes you'll hear like, oh, if it's a great barbecue, you don't need to slather it in sauce. It just needs a dry rub. And I like sauce. I don't like necessarily the super sweet sauce that I feel like non barbecue experts will sometimes use, like the super sugary sauces, but I enjoy my barbecue with sauce. So I don't know if that's controversial.
I wonder if
You're allowed to like what you like.
Yeah. We're going to say it's not controversial, Joanna. You are allowed to experience whatever kind of barbecue you want. And if you want to slather it in sauce, you go ahead. It's not controversial now. We're claiming that it's going to be non-controversial. All right. So because my brain is just gone, I'm going to turn it over to Brett, who interviewed Matthew Padilla, the Culinary Innovation Director at True Food Kitchen, which may be one of Yum's purchases. Who knows? So
you're just going to say that about every restaurant from now on.
A select few, but I feel like that could be in the mix. I feel like I could feel that in the mix. So thanks for joining me, guys.
Thanks, Holly.
Belgioioso Cheese is a family-owned and operated company specializing in artisan Italian cheesemaking. Using only natural ingredients and fresh, local Wisconsin milk, master cheesemakers handcraft a full line of exceptional cheeses, guided by a commitment to quality and a respect for tradition. Ask your distributor about Belgioioso's award-winning fresh mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, mascarpone, American grana, and Parmesan. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty.
How are you, Matthew Padilla? How you been?
I'm excellent. Very busy, but doing very good.
And nonetheless, taking the time to chat with me, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I really appreciate being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And how long have you been at True Food Kitchen?
So I started last February at True Food Kitchen, so a little over a year now.
And you guys just recently did a huge menu relaunch thing, right?
Yeah, so we did a pretty big menu overhaul. So we wanted to grow our menu a little bit. expand our offerings, a larger mix of offerings to appeal to a broader customer base. So we added a couple more pizzas. We added another salad, another starter. So we had a pretty big overhaul of the menu.
And at True Food Kitchen, you have to do it according to Dr. Weil's anti-inflammatory diet, right?
Yes, that's correct. So our restaurant group was founded by Andrew Weil, and if you know anything about him, his philosophy is based around the anti-inflammatory diet. So as we're creating new dishes and as we're putting dishes on, we're very conscious as far as like where we source it from, the impact it's going to have on your body, and trying to do all that while still making it delicious at the same time.
And what was your job before you joined True Food Kitchen?
That's a great question. So I was working as an executive chef for a number of years. Most recently, I was with Auberge Resort. So I was in the luxury hotel segment for a long time. I was with them for about 5 years. I was at their location in Maine. So I was in Kennebunkport, Maine, at the White Barn Inn. So doing a little bit more high-end food. We did have a casual restaurant as well. So within all those hotels that I've worked for, in restaurants, I've done mostly high-end, but majority of them also have casual outlets within them. So having a good mixture of both fine dining and casual restaurants.
And so why did you decide to make the move to True Food Kitchen, which is a chain, although it's a pretty classy chain?
It is a classy chain, and that's one of the reasons I would say that I moved to True Food. I was working, we were a group of hotels too. So, it was a chain of hotels. So it's not anything different in that sense. True Food Kitchen is a brand that I've followed since the beginning. During the beginning of my career, I worked in Tucson. My family is from Tucson, and that's where Dr. Weil is from. And Sam Fox had a lot of restaurants there, and obviously started in Phoenix. So I kind of followed the restaurant group throughout its evolution over time, and it was always attractive to me. I feel like it's one of the few brands that stays true to an executive chef led kitchen. And so, it feels like a real kitchen whenever you walk in these. They're all open kitchens. So you see everybody working, everybody prepping. We make almost everything in house. There's very few things. And the things that we don't make in house, we are very strict on, kind of our sourcing, like Chris Bianco's Di Napoli tomatoes and Force of Nature sausage. So if we don't make it in house, we really want to find good partners that are kind of have the same philosophy as we do.
And how many True Food Kitchen locations are there now? I've lost track.
So we are opening our 44th location in Century City. That opens on May 22nd. So here in a week from today, actually.
And that's Los Angeles, right?
Yes, so that's Los Angeles. It's close to Beverly Hills. Beautiful shopping center. I think it's going to be very successful. A ton of foot traffic. I feel like our food really resonates in the Southwest, especially in California. And our guests are really receptive to the type of food that we do. So I think it's going to be a very successful location. I'm really excited about the space.
That's cool. And so how does it work at your restaurants? As you said, True Food Kitchen is chef driven, but you're one chef. Does each restaurant also have its own chef?
Yeah, so we have a pretty big support team. So being from me, kind of on the innovation side from the top, I create the recipes. I train our regional chefs. So we have 6 regions within those 44 locations. And then those chefs go and oversee, depends on what region they're in, but usually 6 to 8 locations. They go train their executive chefs on new menus, help them, on the day-to-day operations. And then every team has not only an executive chef, they have an executive sous chef and at least one sous chef as well. So, kind of that traditional kitchen brigade style, which is where I'm from. My background, like I said, is a lot more fine dining focused. So it still stays true with kind of the tradition of that traditional French style, if you want to call it that, or a brigade. So, we attract, I think, talent that is looking for that type of experience as well. I think our talent is different than other chains that are more of a kitchen manager, whereas ours are a chef, that really has to operate the business as they would a freestanding restaurant from at least a chef perspective.
And so are the chefs at those 44 restaurants or the regional chefs allowed any kind of variation, or is their focus more on getting the right product in their areas, or what do they have to do? Or just is it just overseeing the kitchen and making sure everything goes well?
It's overseeing the kitchen. We do have, we have a culinary council where we rotate chefs, usually 6 to 8 different executive chefs in, along with our regionals. They have a say on the menu development, and the innovation. Obviously, we don't change a ton, but they do have some insight as far as their feedback to the operations, and we try to keep them involved as much as we can. A focus moving forward, for example, we're going to be re-examining our brunch menu, right? So our culinary council is starting to work on brunch dishes for me, and I'll take that. And the last overhaul in spring, they gave me a lot of good ideas as well. So I'll take some of that. Some of it makes it on the menu in that form, or I take it in and kind of evolve it a little bit and make it work for across the brand. So they do have a lot of insight and a lot of say, and we try to keep their voice as loud as we can. Me being, obviously I'm coming from an executive chef role most recently. I think it's really important to have that.
Yeah, that's cool. And what kind of testing do you guys do? Do you do sort of operational and market tests before you roll it out to all 43, now 44 restaurants?
We do. We look at different menu formats. We may choose a region that we want to test a steak in, or certain restaurants that make sense. So like right now we're testing out 2 different cuts of steak, for example. We're testing out different menu layout. So we do different tests. Pretty much every menu change, we always have some sort of test going on. And that just gives us better insight as far as what we should do on the menu moving forward, what cut of meat makes the most sense for the brand, that sort of thing.
When you have a grass-fed burger that's new to the menu, right? It's a Peruvian grass-fed burger, which it doesn't mean the burger's from Peru, right? It looks like it's the seasonings that are Peruvian.
Yeah, so that one's probably my favorite new menu change, or one of them at least. So that one is based around the sauce. So we do this delicious sauce using ajipanca peppers, and that's kind of the base of the sauce. Our grass-fed beef, we're actually getting it from either Australia or Uruguay, so close to Peru, but not quite all the way in Peru. But yeah, that sauce is nice and tangy. You have the fried egg on top, a nice contrast from the blue cheese that's on there as well. So I really like that burger a lot. That's probably my favorite. It's a little bit more hearty version of our current burger that we had on the menu for so long.
So how is this one different from the previous burger?
I would say with the fried egg on top, it's not something that you normally see. And if you're going to put a fried egg on top, we're going to select the best eggs. So we partnered with Vital Farms, and they're providing all of our eggs. So we have their pasture raised eggs on our menu, which is also something new to the spring menu as well. So as we think about it, of course, everything's in moderation, but we also have to appeal to a bigger customer base. So it's you choosing your indulgences, and whenever you do, instead of a regular grain-fed burger, it's a grass-fed, and you have a pasture-raised egg on top, right?
I love an egg on top of a burger. And you're using bison meat in your breakfast pizza, which also has the Napoli tomato sauce, organic tomato sauce. You got some charred scallion, salsa verde, mozzarella, cotija cheese, jalapeno peppers, and another Vital Farms egg. So that's a lot of fancy stuff.
So there's a lot of fancy stuff.
So as you might have read somewhere, the cost of everything is going up. So how do you figure out how to source that kind of stuff while still keeping your customers, most of whom are getting increasingly price sensitive? How do you keep them coming back while also obviously remaining profitable and doing that?
Yeah, that's of course a never-ending balancing act, especially for a brand like us. It would be much easier if we could drop fryers in and buy Tyson chicken, or a grain-fed beef. So it's balancing that, right? And I think it's also finding kind of a good mix on our menu of lower cost items that kind of balance that out and allow us the kind of runway to play with some of those fun items and unique items that other people don't. But we're always trying to balance that out. We run a pretty good food cost, but it would definitely be much easier if we didn't have the same standards that we do.
Well, it does make sense that, you have a few new pizzas, which tend to be relatively decent food cost items. You got a seasonal spinach and mushroom one that seems like, I'm looking at the menu items. You got some roasted mushrooms, you got some lemon almond ricotta and caramelized onions. Nothing that's gonna break the food cost bank, I don't think there. So that's handy.
Yeah, of course. You have our margarita pizza, and those items allow us to balance it out, bringing in something like the Force of Nature bison sausage.
Which still, like, it's not like you're giving people huge amounts of bison sausage. You're slicing and putting on the pizza, which it
Of
seems like,
course, exactly.
yeah, it seems like a good way to spread out a premium product and still make people feel great about it.
Yeah.
So is this your first time working for a chain?
A chain as far as a restaurant group, yes. So I worked for my first cooking job, actually was for the Kitchen, which they are a small chain of restaurants based out of Boulder, Colorado. But whenever I was with them, I was actually at their first location before they had expanded. So as far as a chain restaurant group, I have not. So the only chains I've worked for would be Auberge Resorts as far as in the food service industry.
And that is a hotel chain, so that counts. But you
Yeah.
were on the ground working at the White Barn Inn in Kennebunkport. So it was, I'm guessing, a job with many hours in the day.
It definitely was a job with many hours of the day, and especially during the summertime, right? It was a very seasonal location. We also did a lot of events and lobster bakes during the summer. We would do weddings. Both of our restaurants were extremely busy. In the summertime, we pretty much run 100% occupancy rate at that hotel. So definitely a lot of time spent in the kitchen.
So as you said, as every chef says, if you're working in the kitchen, you work a lot of hours and you're busy and it's hard but fun. So now I'm guessing you have more regular hours and like a desk and stuff.
I do have a desk, but I actually prefer to be in the restaurant. So it's funny because if I'm here in Phoenix, if I'm not traveling to a location, or, I was just in Century City to help them with their menu training. If I'm not doing something like that, I spend about half my time in the office and the other half in the restaurant. And if that means I set up my computer in the PDR, I'm a chef at heart, so I miss the thrill and the excitement of the restaurant. So I'm in the restaurant quite often.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like, if you have like regular hours, then like often chefs really love that energy of the kitchen. So you it sounds like you take care of that, Jones, by going to the restaurant.
100%. So like I said, I spent a good amount of time there, and our lunch service is very busy. So, I get to interact with them. That's where I do my menu testing right now as well until we build a new office. So I actually do all my innovation testing at our original location at the Biltmore here in Phoenix. So you'll see me over on the prep table working on new recipes quite often.
And so then you test it right there on the customers? Like, here, let me send you out a free whatever it is. What do you think of it?
Yeah, sometimes, and that's one thing that we're looking at for the future, trying to evolve kind of our innovation process to get the customer more involved than what we have. And that's definitely something that we've been considering. But otherwise, we love to, all the managers, all the staff obviously tries it all. So they love it whenever I'm there because I'm always cooking new and inventive stuff. But we do definitely give it to some of our regulars and people that come in as well.
Yeah, now that I work from home more than I used to, which used to be never, and now I work from home most of the time, I get to become a regular in some of the bars and restaurants in my own neighborhood, and I've helped them with development of their chicken sandwiches and stuff. They're like, here, try this. What do you think? Which is fun.
Yeah. Of course, all the guests are always really excited, right? Everyone always wants to be the sampler, so never a lack of those around.
And I'm guessing that with regulars, maybe you get more honest feedback than with your average focus group because, they feel more like family.
I agree with that. And, I also think that there is something to be said whenever you're working inside of an organization, innovation, sometimes you can get tunnel vision, right? And it could be the people that you're working with, it could be you yourself. You know, it happens to me as well during that process. And I think having those outside views are definitely very helpful for us.
Cool. So what are some other new items on the menu? You got farmers market crudité with hatch chili ranch. That's cool. And
Yeah, so
muamara. That's neat.
yeah, so that one's a fun one. I love that muhammara dip. I've used it in the past. Actually would do it in the summertime as sort of part of bread service. So it's a nice dip. And it goes great with vegetables, bread, you know, you name it. It's an awesome spread. And then hatch green chilies, you know, they're near and dear to my heart. My dad was in the military and I lived in New Mexico for, you know, 6 or 7 years growing up as a kid. So close to hatch where the chilies come from. So I love having hatch green chilies on the menu. So you'll see those not only on the crudité, we also have a hatch ranch turkey burger that we put on the menu also. And then we have hatch green chilies in our brunch quiche. So we have them kind of sprinkled around. It's one of my favorite ingredients. So I love having those on the menu.
Yeah, they're delicious. And I grew up in Colorado, so I'm familiar with hatch green chilies.
Yeah.
Although at the time we didn't know they were that big a deal. You know, we just ate them when
they were just part of life, right? Now
Yeah.
they're kind of part of, you know, the popular culture. I think they've gotten a lot popular over time. But yeah, whenever I was a kid, my parents would buy a bag of roasted chilies and we'd have them in the freezer, you know, all year long to put on our quesadillas or burgers or whatever it may be.
That's good parenting, I think.
I think so too.
My parents didn't do that, but they were good parents anyway. So when it comes to crudité, do you like standardize like what vegetables you're going to use, or does it vary on like the location? Can like the local chefs find their own good vegetables, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so you know, as we grow bigger, we've
Mhm.
started to standardize more things. I think in the past they actually used to leave that up to the chefs at each location. So we've tried to, you know, we'll work with purchasing and figure out what vegetables are going to be the best for that, you know, short menu run, and then we choose them for them. Sometimes that evolves, though. Obviously, if there's a shortage on broccolini, for example, which we've had, then we may sub something else out. But most of that communication comes from us.
I see. And is that something that you are able to change periodically as seasons come in and out? That seems kind of like a thing True Food Kitchen can do.
Yeah, you know, obviously are trying to keep the seasonality is you know one of the top things as far as our menu changes are concerned. So as of right now, we change the menu 4 times a year, which is pretty standard. I mean, I feel like the amount of change that we do have, it's a good amount of change, but we always try to stay true to the seasonality for vegetables. And so right now we have asparagus on the menu. Here, our summer menu coming up soon, we're going to have corn and watermelon and more tomatoes and that sort of thing. So we stick true to the seasonality, but we also do have some of those evergreen items that pretty much stay the same year round.
You can always find carrots, I think. Can you always find carrots?
We can, at least, yes.
That's cool. How about in terms of beverage? Are you guys doing much in the world of beverage innovation?
We are doing a lot. So we changed the beverage menu, seasonal as well. We are always constantly changing our cocktails, our cocktail program. If you look at some of our cocktails online, again, you know, they like to cross utilize a lot of ingredients that we're using. So things like watermelon here pretty soon, blueberries, that sort of thing. If I'm bringing something in, especially whenever it comes to fruit, they tend to cross utilize it. And ube powder is another fun one that they've incorporated into a pink lemonade that we're doing. So there's a nice mixture of using some of the culinary ingredients in beverage as well.
And that ube is in your pink lime tart that was rolled out as part of the new menu, right?
Yes, which is becoming a fan favorite. It's very popular. It's done very well. It's whenever you see it walking through the dining room, it's one of those dishes where you see it in the bright color. You're like, wow, what is that? I want to order one of those. Kind of like the crudité, you know, you see something, this bright, fresh item walking through, and it's very appealing on the eyes, and it's vegan. If you eat it, would have no idea if I didn't tell you it was vegan. So that one hits a lot of good notes for us.
And it's in a Marcona almond date crust, which sounds great, and topped with coconut whipped cream, which I guess, since it's vegan, is whipped coconut cream rather than cream with coconut added.
Correct. Yep. And that date, so the date almond crust, it does have some oats in there as well. Think of it, one of my favorite things to eat. I love dates, but I love date-based bars as well. So it almost has like a date bar crust texture to it. It's really nice.
Is there a lot of demand for vegan items at True Food Kitchen? Because there's a lot of talk, especially among vegans, about growing interest in vegan food, but then sometimes I hear that, people don't necessarily order it all that much, but you have a different customer base than a lot of chains.
I think we have a pretty wide customer base. I think ours is probably wider than a lot of companies, I would say. So we did an experiment for the spring menu and offered our vegan burger on all of our burger options, and I think that's gone over very well. We do have a large customer base that is vegan, so we like to have some of those offerings on the menu or if not, then a lot of dishes can be made vegan. So I would say our customer base is not a huge amount of vegans, but there is a big following because there's not a lot of chain restaurants that provide nutrient dense and delicious vegan food like we do.
Well, and just because something's vegan doesn't mean only vegans can order it. I would eat that tart also, even though I also eat animals. It sounds great.
It is great. And that's, I think, what's surprising to a lot of people, right? They have a negative connotation, what you get at the grocery store. Frozen may not be very good, but then whenever you eat it at True Food, we really want to make sure that it's delicious before we put it on the menu as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So when it comes to the anti-inflammatory diet, how much do you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're developing new items?
I think it's always in the back of our mind. I don't think that we can 100% be a total anti-inflammatory diet. You know what I mean? We do have a bar program. Obviously, alcohol, you can have it in moderation. Same with meat, and again, going back to kind of our sourcing, I think a lot of it has to go back to sustainable partners, eco-friendly. So if someone is going to indulge in something, then they're indulging in the best form of that possible. But as far as during the development process, there's always a lot of thought put into that. And I actually do all the nutrition whenever I'm making dishes as well. So all the nutrition facts on the menu, I'm in charge of. But it's been eye-opening because as I'm creating a dish, I'll put the nutritionals in and I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Or sometimes I'm surprised, like the pink lime tart is a lot better for you than a lot of other tarts you're going to have, right? So I think it's all in moderation. And of course, we can't have a completely anti-inflammatory menu or else we're going to be kind of cornering ourselves into a very small segment. But if we are going to venture beyond that, it's going to be the best version of that possible.
So when you came on board as the corporate chef, did you get anti-inflammatory training? Did you meet with Dr. Weil or how did that onboarding process go?
I did meet with Dr. Weil. I kind of delve into reading, books, listening to a lot of podcasts that he had done in the past. And honestly, I like his anti-inflammatory diet because it's pretty straightforward. It's nothing too complicated. And it is pretty easy to follow as long as you're, know what to kind of choose. And then from that, I was able to create a lot of dishes that fall within that philosophy. So for me, it was a pretty easy transition, to be honest with you. I've cooked a lot of different types of food though, so it wasn't too crazy of a transition.
But it has to be, well, I would think it's nice to have to be able to keep nutrition in mind while you're creating a menu item. And it's not like, I don't think True Food Kitchen that adheres to any particular cuisine. So you have a really wide range to choose from. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. I would probably describe our cuisine leaning towards California cuisine, because in California you kind of have that melting pot of Mediterranean and Asian, and we do have some kind of South American or Mexican inspired dishes as well. So I think that's exactly right. We don't necessarily have to adhere to anything, and we pull a lot of techniques and ingredients from all over the world that kind of fit within that philosophy, which is very helpful, because on one side we do have a limit to what we can use, like fryers and seed oils and certain non-organic items. But then on the other end of it, we get to work with a lot of fun ingredients that I didn't work with before True Food, like baru nuts and things like that.
Bar nuts, what is that?
Baru nuts are a type of nut that are very healthy for you. They have a similar flavor to a peanut. So we don't have peanuts on our menu because it's one of the most common allergens. That's also tends to be pretty reactive in people that do have it. So we don't have any peanuts on our menu, right? And baru nuts were introduced to me as kind of an alternative to them. So Baruca's nuts, they're from Brazil. They are delicious, nutrient packed, but again, they kind of have that same flavor profile as like a peanut, or a mix between like a peanut maybe and like a walnut or something like that.
That's cool. Now I'm asking the internet. Barrow nuts, Barrow nuts. Is that right?
Baru, or Baruca's Baru. Yeah.
Okay. I now see Baruca's nuts. Yes. Okay. In case our audience wanted to look into it, I seem to make sense to check that. Cool. So what are we going to be enjoying at True Food Kitchen this summer? Can you give us a hint?
Summertime, so a little bit of a sneak peek. We are going to be transitioning from one item I'm really excited about. We're transitioning from our sea bass that we currently get from a company called Pacifico, which is fantastic. We're actually going to be using an Idaho trout that I'm very excited to use. So Idaho trout from a company called Riverence, another one that if anyone is interested in looking that up, but they're farm raised, but there's sustainable practices and just a delicious product. So I'm really excited for that. It's kind of a Mediterranean dish. So we have some quinoa, artichokes, roasted red peppers, a lemon oregano sauce, kind of like a vinaigrette on the drizzled on top. So it has a nice bright acidity. So I'm really excited for that dish. I'm trying to think what else that I'm very excited about right now. There's a good amount of change too. So we're doing a tuna tataki dish that's very good. The tuna tataki is going to have almost like a quinoa brown rice mixture on the bottom. Some of those baru nuts I was just talking about give it a nice crunch. A mango chutney on top to kind of cut through it. And then we made a really bright, acidic, and a little bit of sweetness to it. Tataki sauce that's going to go over the tuna. So I really like that one. It's really well balanced, really fresh and bright for the summer. A couple of things that we're bringing back from last summer that were really successful as well. So we have a mango tart. So we're going to be changing the pink tart out for mango tart for the summertime. And this is one of our best selling desserts and uses that same date almond crust as the other dish. But it has a nice, really light, bright filling on the inside that's made with mango curd.
Sounds pretty great.
Yeah. So those are two that I'm probably the most excited about, or three that I'm most excited about right now. But a lot of change. Fall, we're looking at, is usually one of our bigger menu overhauls. So we change out a lot of vegetables, obviously, that we're not going to get, like asparagus and those sort of things come off. And then heartier things come on the menu, like farro and Brussels and roasted butternut squash. So the next two menu changes are going to have a good amount of change.
That's exciting. Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, Matthew Padilla. Nice to meet you. And I hope we get to do it in real life sometime. Yeah, best of luck. Keep up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And hopefully some more people will learn more about True Food and come visit us and realize how delicious our food is.